I got this snake in the grass here and I need to get it built up. I've got a slurry of Shimano GRX Di2 components, and so I thought I'd walk you through the full install and show you how to go from naked frame to shred sled. I unwrapped this thing yesterday from the box and I installed the headset cups and the fork race, but I don't have the proper drift sizes for this, so I just used some cone wrenches. For the race, I gradually tapped it into place. Now I have to cut my steer tube, and unfortunately I left my steer tube cutting guide in North Carolina, so I'm gonna have to run over to the bike shop. Before we get too far into this, let's talk about the things that we'll need. A GRX derailleur, right, left shifter. And we got some wires here. I don't know exactly which wires I'm gonna use because new this year is I'm trying out the bar end junction box. So we're gonna have way less cables hanging outside of the bike. We got the battery, XTR pedals, the seat post, the integrated battery mount. This is a carbon steer tube, so you're gonna have an expansion plug in there to pull your headset together. I have the 42 tooth 172.5 GRX crank. I'm gonna put a Stages left arm on that to harvest all the data. And I'm going with the 1130. This is the Bluetooth dongle adapter, which will be really nice for updating the firmware on all the components after I install them. And finally, some rotors, which will go on these Dura-Ace clinchers, a speed terrain on the back and an all-terrain on front, tubeless. I'll be racing tubulars, but for the sake of training, tubeless it is. Let's get into it. First things first, just because it's easy, is I'm gonna set up those wheels with tubeless tires, put the rotors on, and the cassette. Party in the front, business in the back. I'm gonna remove the valve core. 140 rotors front and rear. And please do me a favor and remove this sticker. That was pretty easy. Now just repeat on the rear wheel. Okay, these things are set up now. That was the easy part. Now we get into the meat of this project. Okay, so let's run through some basic Di2 setup. I'm using the Pro integrated Di2 seat post here, so I'll just put the battery right up in here, and then I'll have a cable that runs down, and I'll run junction box B right here in the bottom bracket. From junction box B, power will be diverted to my rear derailleur, and then there will also be a cable that runs all the way up. It'll pop out here and be wrapped around my brake line, which will take it to a port right under here. And then that's where junction box A will go in my bar end. From there, wire will go to each shifter, and the wire that goes to the other side will go through the handlebar. We're only gonna have one cable wrapped around the brake line, as opposed to this past year where I had junction box A under the stem, and then I had all the cables were exposed here. So let's put the battery in. It's ideal to have a pair of snap ring pliers. So you take the shims, put it on the battery, slide it down in, and it stops. Then you want to put these spacers in that come with it. One spacer, then a wavy washer. Then you take your snap ring. You don't want to do that. Once you get your battery installed, then you're gonna want to get your wire. I've got an 850mm wire to go from the seat post to junction box B at the bottom bracket. I recommend using this tool so you don't bend your wires up. We use a 650 cable for this one. For sure don't want to have wiring that's too short. Success. Now we run a wire from here up to junction box A. We use a big 1400mm wire. Which side do I want my junction box on? Junction box A install. Full disclosure, I've never used one of these before. Okay, I got these wires all set. This is the way I'm gonna run things. From the battery, it'll plug into the junction box A here. Then I'm gonna use this 500mm cable to go from the junction box A to the shifter. Let me go get the shifter. See, what's cool is there's two ports for a cable to be plugged in here. So what I'll do is I'll plug the power source into one, and then I will tether the power source from this shifter to my other shifter through the handlebar with this 1400mm wire, which is not necessary. I just like to run each shifter being able to work. That way, if I crash and break my preferred shifter, I can set up my left shifter to shift the rear gears exactly the same. Let's hook all this together and see if it actually works. A box goes to the shifter. The shifter goes to the shifter. Okay, this is the moment of truth. Everything is hooked up. Let's see if it moves. Now, just because everything's unhooked and whatnot, replace a connection with the Bluetooth dongle. Do a long press on the junction box until it goes into Christmas mode. Ooh, that's the dongle. So now we're connecting. So then it'll pull up this page of all the components that are connected here. Update all. It seems like only my Bluetooth dongle was in need of a firmware update. So that's cool, but what we're also gonna do from this screen is customize. I use this button to go up the cassette and this button to go down the cassette, and I will program that shifter to do the same. That way if I crash in a race situation and mess my right shifter up, I have the left shifter to get to the pit. Rear shift down, and we want this to do a rear shift up. So now they're mirrored. I also changed the buttons up here to control shifting up and down. I run the button on the right shifter to do a rear shift up into it. That would be a harder gear. And I run this one to do a rear shift down, which would be an easier gear. Disconnect. I think the next step for me is to take the fork off and take a trip to the bike shop, have that cut. I think Shermie's gonna come with me. Shermie, you ready? Let's go, mister. Shermie, come here. Come on, mister. I'm going to the bike shop. You ready? See you, Mom. Let's do this thing. We're already here, so I think while we wait for that steer tube to get cut, we're gonna hit Blue Cow. Jeremy, come on. What do you think, mister? I got some ice cream. Come on, let's go for a walk. No. Come on, go for a walk. Oh. Thanks, man.
Hey, no problem.
Thanks, underdog. We out. We're back in the backyard with a fresh cut steer tube. Now we need that expansion plug. We need a K-edge stem mount. Got the headset all taken care of. The only thing left is to clean this wiring up, put the brakes on, feed them through the frame, connect them to the levers, do a bleed, and bottom bracket. Oh yeah, and seat. We're making good progress. So I just cleaned up the handlebars by just electrical taping some of this extra wire fast to the bar, and always want to keep a little extra loop here just in case you crash and it turns the hood, it won't rip out the Di2 wiring. I'm about to stuff the B box up into the frame, and before I do that, I'm gonna zip tie a little bit of styrofoam around it. That way if it bounces around in there, it won't make any noise. Leave this little tail on there because that'll push against the frame and help hold it in place. Next, brake. We're gonna do the rear brake first. Through the frame, under the BB, up the down tube, come out this port, wrap around the head tube, and then we'll connect it. Before you go ahead and cut this and connect it, you're gonna want to leave enough slack so that if your bar turns all the way, you don't end up pulling on your cable. And then you're also gonna want to put the wheels on it and put it on the ground and get your handlebar hood placement pretty much dead on it. I mean, there will be some wiggle room once you get it set up, but you don't want to set these brake lines up and then have to move your hood a bunch. It could put too much tension on it depending on how much you need to move it. All right, once you get that cut, I should note your olive is in there, so you're gonna wanna unscrew that with your 8mm. And then you're gonna want to get these two pieces and another barb, some vice grips and a hammer. Okay, so you're gonna wanna take your barb, push it in the hole. Then you take these two pieces, you sandwich it around the housing. You take your vice grips or your channel locks, then you hammer it in until it's flush with the rest of the housing. Take this thing, whoop, almost forgot. Before you do that, and you have to take it back apart, make sure you put this piece back and any other pieces that go around the housing to make it flush in the frame. That was damn near disastrous. Now you put this guy back on, and then the olive, which like I said was in the shifter housing. So what'll happen here is this will touch the inside of the housing port, and then this screw will push the olive into place and it will crunch it around the housing, compress it, and make a seal. So you want to make sure the cable is all the way in, and then you can start screwing. You want to make sure that's pretty snug but not too snug. The torque spec is 5 Newton meters, says it right there, which is the same as a stem bolt. All right, back brakes hooked up. Let's see if it works. It works. Now we just got to do the front. Same process. Don't make it too tight so you can't take your stem off. You do want to have a little bit of play here. Front and rear brakes are hooked up. Di2 is hooked up. Basically, I just got to put a seat on, bottom bracket, cranks, and chain. While we got these hoods peeled back, we might as well give these brakes a bleed. So they are connected and they do work, but there's likely some air bubbles in there because I cut the line and connected it to the shift lever. So we won't pull mineral oil out of the caliper for now. We're just gonna hook the hopper up to there and see if we can't shake a couple air bubbles loose. Come over here. This is my bleed bag. Fresh, clean mineral oil. What you're gonna need is this hopper with this extender, the adapter, the road hood. Then you'll need this 2.5 to take the reservoir screw off, and some fresh mineral oil. Take this screw out. There's the reservoir. And now you just take your hopper, give it some squeezes. You can see some air bubbles coming out already. So you just pump this up. Keep pumping. I haven't had any air bubbles come out in a while, so we're probably pretty good. If you want to be super thorough, give the line a little flick. Just helps shimmy the air bubbles out a little bit. So that's how you do that. If you were gonna do a full bleed, you do this, and then you take this syringe and you come back here, you hook the syringe into that bleed port, then you crack it loose and open and pull mineral oil through the line, keeping an eye on the hopper so it doesn't go empty. This is also how you freshen up your mineral oil. It gets black over time as brake dust and dirt get past the seals. That diminishes performance, so every couple months you should do this. This is dialed. We'll do the same to the front, and then we'll be dialed with the brakes. We'll move on to the bottom bracket and finish this thing up. Okay, bottom bracket time. This is super easy. It sounds intimidating, but it's really not, especially if you have a bearing press like this one. So it's pretty simple. You put these handles on the threaded rod, and then you tighten them, and it pushes the bearings in on either side, nice and even. So what you want to do first, make sure you don't have any cables kinked and no cables are in the way that are going to get pinched. That looks pretty good. You're going to want to do this one side at a time. So you just want to make sure you get the right size drift. That's what these are called. 24mm drift. Then you'll come over here to your bicicleta. Make sure you check drive side. This is the left side, the right side. So we go in this way. This will go on the other side and pull against the frame, pulling everything together. Those noises are normal, I promise. Make sure it's flush all the way, don't over tighten. Now we do the other side, same thing. What you want to do with these sleeves on these Shimano bottom brackets is put your finger in there. Mine actually came loose during all that, so just make sure you push it in and it'll fit nice and snug. Because what'll happen is if it's not in right, when you push this in, it'll crimp the edge and mess up that sleeve, and then either you won't notice and your crank will spin really terribly, or you won't even be able to put your crank in. Before you press it all the way in, I like to come back out and make sure that that thing is in there snug, that sleeve, and it's still in place. It's like a measure twice, cut once type of situation. Pushing this in. Test it again with your finger. Look through the hole. Looks pretty good. Bottom bracket's in, that means it's crank time. These new bottom brackets can be pretty tight when you put a crank in for the first time. Probably have to give it some love taps. Got this sexy Stages arm for harvesting all the power and punchy efforts during those cross races. These things are pressure washer approved, by the way. So you just want to snug this spindle bolt up. You don't want to over tighten it, because then you're only hurting yourself. Just enough so that you can put this safety catch in. Don't be too alarmed if these new Shimano bottom brackets don't spin super free. They loosen up within a ride and they last forever. See what I'm saying? Give it time. Okay, I guess it's time to install a chain. And then we're gonna need a saddle. Black WTB Silverado or purple orange. I am gonna put orange bar tape on, so I'm thinking purple orange. If you got a new chain and you don't have your old chain to measure off of, or you're switching stuff up, this is how I cut it to length. I'm sure some people are gonna say I'm doing it wrong, but it's worked for me every time, all the time. I put the derailleur in the easiest gear, and then I pull this to about 4 o'clock. So for a 4230, I'm gonna cut out 8 links. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Quick link time. So now I'm gonna drop it into a harder gear to give me some more chain to work with. And then I always just put it at the top. Set. Now pedals. Now that we got pedals on this bike, we can pedal it and do the adjustments, because fresh out of the box, the Shimano derailleurs do not come set up to your specific limit screws. So that's really all we have to adjust, because we don't have a front derailleur. This is always confusing to me, but the way that I remember it is high for high speed, low for low speed. So high speed would be the smaller cogs, L would be low speed, the taller cogs. And as you can see, maybe you can't, but that screw isn't touching the limit stop. So for sure that needs adjusted. It's just touching now. You just want to come up in here and make sure that it's completely level under that last cog. Now we'll go for the high gears, or I mean for the low gears, see? Low speed. Again, you can see there, the limit isn't even touching. Just touching there, and I'm gonna go a quarter turn off. And this thing is rideable. Oh yeah, B limit. That looks pretty good. I'm not sure what the measurement rule of thumb is for the B limit, but basically you just want it to shift into that top cog without that grinding noise, where you hear the chain actually pushing into the teeth rather than just floating up into the next gear. So we're gonna leave it, flip the clutch on, and now the last thing to do is ride it around, make sure I got my hoods positioned properly. Then we just gotta wrap bars. I think we're dialed. All right, this thing's ready for cross practice tonight. I am gonna wait and put the finishing tape on until after cross practice, just in case I wanna make a couple adjustments, then I didn't waste that finishing tape. Excuse me, Sharon. Take a gander at this thing. Major Jake reporting for duty.